Are we standing or sitting?
Whatever you prefer.
What is usually you
stand?
I will follow the rules of this very respectable institute. In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit.
Amen.
Our Father,
who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil.
Come, Holy Spirit, enlighten our intelligence and inflame our hearts, and lead us into the whole truth and love. Our Blessed Mother,
Pray for us.
our Father St. John,
Pray for us.
St. Andrew.
Pray for us.
Okay, so as usual,
So I just with the first two, it says you lock it on both sides
Okay.
and the fans. So turn on the fans.
Real quick, sorry. Did you hear from Tim how he... Oh, I guess you're recording. Never mind. We'll talk later. I was curious how he...
Yes.
so as usual, we will start with a spiritual candy from the wisdom of the desert, an apophthegma of
Dessert first.
of Abba. A brother asked one of the elders, "What good thing shall I do and have life thereby?" The old man replied, "God alone knows what is good. However, I have heard it said that someone inquired of Father Abbot Nisteros the Great, the friend of Abbot Anthony, asking, 'What good work shall I do?' And that he replied, 'Not all works are alike. For Scripture says that Abraham was hospitable and God was with him. Elijah loved solitary prayer and God was with him. And David was humble and God was with him. Therefore, whatever you see your soul to desire according to God, do that thing, and you shall keep your heart safe.'" So there's no such a thing like the best vocation. The best vocation is the one which is given to me personally. If it is a hospitality, go and be hospitable. If it is solitude, go and be solitary. If it is being humble, just go and be humble. And God will be with you. Isn't it beautiful? Okay, so now the main dish. And we have the two most extensive and most important commandments tonight. The fifth commandment concerning life and the sixth commandment concerning love. And actually both are very closely united, because love is the source of life in God and in us. So there will be a lot of things to see, and that's why because of this we are obliged to serve, unfortunately. But if there's something which really important for you, just stop and we will discuss. It's more important to have maybe some point deeper and clarified for you than have a general vision, but with what is really important for you, misunderstood or not understood enough. Okay? So, the fifth commandment, you shall not kill. And then, amendment of Jesus, would you like to read it? It's just before 22:58.
You have heard what it was said to the men of old. Oh, you have heard that it was said to the men of old, "You shall not kill, and whoever kills should be liable to judgment. But I say to you that everyone who is angry with his brother shall be liable to judgment."
So see, this makes, this explanation of Jesus makes us understand why for this commandment, you shall not kill, is such a big portion. It's like 20 pages. Because it extends to a lot of other areas. The most important is that human life is sacred. Let's read 22:58.
Human life is sacred because from its beginning it involves the creative action of God, and it remains forever in a special relationship with the Creator, who is its sole end. God alone is the Lord of life from its beginning until its end. No one can, under any circumstance, claim for himself the right directly to destroy an innocent human being.
So this is like the basic foundation why it is untouchable. Life is sacred. It's not we who gave it. It's not to us to take it away. Parents, they are not givers of life. They are transmitters of life. It's not the same. The life finally comes from God, and including the spiritual life, as we will see. So we have this chapter on the witness of the sacred history, of course. So we have the very first murder in the human history, Abel's murder by his brother Cain, and the anger of God before this crime. So we will just pass it because we don't have time. However, it is not because the life is sacred that I should let myself be killed if another guy wants to. There is such a thing as legitimate defense. Let's read 2263.
The legitimate defense of persons and societies is not an exception to the prohibition against the murder of the innocent that constitutes intentional killing. The act of self-defense can have a double effect: the preservation of one's own life and the killing of the aggressor. The one is intended, the other is not.
2264.
Love toward oneself remains a fundamental principle of morality. Therefore, it is legitimate to insist on respect for one's own right to life. Someone who defends his life is not guilty of murder, even if he is forced to deal his aggressor a lethal blow. If a man in self-defense uses more than necessary violence, it will be unlawful, whereas if he repels force with moderation, his defense will be lawful. Nor is it necessary for salvation that a man omit the act of moderate self-defense to avoid killing the other man, since one is bound to take more care of one's own life than of another's.
And 2265.
Wait, can we pause a second?
Mm-hmm.
So on that part there, that last sentence, since one is bound to take more care of one's own life than of another's. Like, I know they cover abortion and everything further on, but couldn't you use that as an argument for, like, a woman could use that as an argument that if she is pregnant and for some medical reason, like her life's at great risk, if it's saying one is bound to take more care of one's own life than another,
sure,
then couldn't you use that to justify?
There's even a more serious argument, because Jesus said there's no greater love than to give one's life for... That's the point, for the friends, and the enemy is not a friend. So in this sense, there's a different gradation of life, because in the case of the mother and child, when they are in danger, in the tradition, church always thought that it is a heroic deed of a mother to give her life for a child. But now I don't remember exactly. I think it says that she still has the right, like, to choose. But it's better, it's more holy, it's more saintly to let the child live, which is so contrary to the mentality of nowadays. So the point is, because it is about an innocent life, whereas the aggressor is not an innocent life. In this sense, in this particular sense, I mean, it is also a question of justice. It is unjust to let yourself be killed by someone who unjustly comes and wants you to kill. Whereas in the case of which you gave, or like in giving one's life for one's friends, like in martyrdom, for example. It is all about charity, charity which loves the other in order to save him, to spare life for him, either of the baby or like your fellow citizens, etc. Whereas to spare the enemy's life who is threatening to kill you, it might be a big lack of charity, not only towards you but also to your fellow citizens, because the guy will continue to do, because you let yourself be killed. It encourages him to do evil. So it's not a charity. The charity is not to be a mat. The Christian is not a mat for people, see, to brush their feet. No, there's also the justice. Of course, more than the justice, there's a charity, but again, the charity applies differently in the case of like the baby, or like your fellow brothers, sisters, whatever, for whom you would give your life, and the enemy. It is a charity to stop him. It would be against charity to let him go and do the evil. See, it's very, very different. Got you?
Mm-hmm.
So let's read 2265, which exactly explains this.
Legitimate defense can be not only a right but a grave duty for someone responsible for another's life, the common good of the family or of the state.
See, because if you are a dad of
Did
6
that.
children, you are not to let yourself be killed, because there are 6 children which would remain orphans.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not only a right; it's a duty to blow back, even if it's lethal. Okay, and then the following articles is about the war. We skip them because there will be a whole chapter on the war, so we will come back to it later. Intentional homicide, very clearly, direct and intentional killing is a gravely sinful. And some of them are even gravier. Let's look into 2268, just the second paragraph in smaller characters.
Oh, yes. The 5th commandment forbids direct and intentional killing as gravely sinful. The murderer and those who cooperate voluntarily in murder commit a sin that cries out to heaven for vengeance. Infanticide, fratricide, parricide, and the murder of a spouse are especially grave crimes by reason of the natural bonds which they break. Concern for eugenics or public health cannot justify any murder, even if commanded by public authority.
Like, for example, to kill all the people who would be sick with some mortal and very contagious illness. It would not be moral to exterminate them because they just sick. The public authority has the duty to manage the situation, but not by using immoral means. So there should be like a quarantine. You pronounce?
What?
Quarantine.
Oh, quarantine.
Quarantine and whatever, but not killing. And of course, indirect homicide is still grave sin, whereas unintentional killing is not morally imputable. We can look into 2269, the last paragraph of the 3.
Unintentional killing is not morally imputable, but one is not exonerated from grave offense if, without proportionate reasons, he has acted in a way that brings about someone's death, even without the intention to do so.
For example, like driving like a crazy speeding, you do not intend to kill anyone, but actually it is because you were speeding that you killed someone. So you are still responsible, even if you did not have the intention. Abortion. So here I would like us to see that this thing was very clearly defined as abominable sin since the very beginning of Christian era. Let's look into 2271.
Since the first century, the Church has affirmed the moral evil of every procured abortion. This teaching has not changed and remains unchangeable. Direct abortion, that is to say, abortion willed either as an end or a means, is gravely contrary to the moral law. You shall not kill the embryo by abortion, and shall not cause the newborn to perish. God, the Lord of life, has entrusted to men the noble mission of safeguarding life, and men must carry it out in a manner worthy of themselves. Life must be protected with the utmost care from the moment of conception. Abortion and infanticide are abominable crimes.
Did you notice? You shall not cause the newborn to perish. It makes the allusion to this abominable pagan custom. When a baby was born, the father had the right either to let him live by taking the baby in his lap, which would mean that he acknowledges him as his son or daughter, or just like gladiators, and the baby was supposed to be killed. It was the decision of the father. So the church's teaching since the beginning was no, it's sacred. You should not touch, even more because it's an innocent being who cannot defend himself. And even you probably know that the church reserves the most serious punishment for this kind of crime. Let's look into 2272.
Formal cooperation in an abortion constitutes a grave offense. The Church attaches the canonical penalty of excommunication to this crime against human life. A person who procures a completed abortion incurs excommunication late sententia by the very commission of the offense, and subject to the conditions provided by canon law. The Church does not thereby intend to restrict the scope of mercy. Rather, she makes clear the gravity of the crime committed, the irreparable harm done to the innocent who is put to death, as well as to the parents and the whole of society.
Because in this way we lose plenty of talents and wonderful people to love and to enjoy. So excommunication, what it is, the excommunication is to be kicked out of the church, which is extremely grave. There's no graver sentence in the canon law. However, go ahead.
Do they have to go through a bishop to be?
It used to be the custom. Now, usually the bishops, they give in their dioceses the permission to all the priests to forgive this sin, because there's more and more. And then also there's some conditions. For example, if the woman did not know that what she's doing would bring her excommunication, it does not occur for her. But if she knew, then of course it happens.
Sorry, if she didn't know it would excommunicate her, then she wouldn't be excommunicated.
It's still a grave sin to be confessed, of course, but like a regular confession would suffice. Whereas for the excommunication, it's not only absolution, because when you excommunicate, you don't have even the right to receive absolution. You need first to be brought back to the communion of the church, and then only you can receive the sacrament, including the absolution. Yeah. So it shows that it's really, really important. That's why church maintains it, even now, because of these different conditions. It's, I would say, easily available, but it's still very grave. It's kept late sententia, let's say, automatically.
Father, do you know if the same is true for a person who helps a woman get an abortion? Or for an
I
abortionist,
think so.
the doctor who actually performs an abortion.
I think that, I'm not sure, but I think so, yes. That would be interesting to look into the canon law. Do you have a canon law here?
Oh, thank you.
78. Let's look into the canons 1323, 1324. 1323, 13...
Oh, sorry, this is the
Oh, that's
it
the
is-
Catechism.
okay,
Just
okay.
noticed I was
I thought
reading
that
it from
you
my
grabbed the
Oh,
canon law.
I thought you just. Yeah, I don't think
We
we.
have.
Is that the
canon law.
catechism, or are you
I'm reading the
something?
catechism
Okay.
from my phone.
Yeah, that's what I just picked up on.
Okay.
No problem. That's
Okay.
okay. I'd rather read it from here. I just didn't see it in a quick look on the shelf.
Yeah. So I
Oh,
should...
look, Code of Canon Law.
Oh, look at that.
Absolutely. Let's look into it. 1323, 1324. Would you read these two canons? Or anybody? This one and this one.
The following are not subject to penalties when they have violated a law or precept. 1. A person who has not yet completed the 16th year of age. 2. A person who without any fault was unaware of violating a law or precept. However, inadvertence and error are equivalent to ignorance. 3. A person who acted out of physical force or in virtue of a mere accident which could neither be foreseen nor prevented when foreseen. 4. A person who acted out of grave fear, even if only relatively grave, or out of necessity or out of serious inconvenience, unless the act is intrinsically evil or verges on harm to souls. A person who, for the sake of legitimate self-defense or defense of another, acted against an unjust aggressor with due moderation. 6. A person who lacked the use of reason with due regard for the prescriptions of, and then it references other paragraphs. 7. A person who, without any fault, felt that the circumstances, and 4 or 5 were verified. 1 who violates a law or precept is not exempt from a penalty, but the penalty set by law or precept must be tempered or a penance substituted in its place if the offense was committed. 1 by a person with only the imperfect use of reason. 2 by a person who lacked the use of reason due to drunkenness or another similar mental disturbance which was culpable. 3 in the serious heat of passion which did not proceed and impede all deliberation of mind and consent of will, as long as the passion itself had not been voluntarily stirred up or fostered.
There's plenty more.
Yeah. 4 by a minor who has completed the age of 16 years. 5 by a person who is forced through grave fear, even if only relatively grave, or through necessity or serious inconvenience, if the offense was intrinsically evil or verged on harm to souls. 6 by a person who, for the sake of legitimate self-defense or defense of another, acted against an unjust aggressor both without due moderation. 7 against one gravely and unjustly provoking it. 8 by one who erroneously yet culpably thought one of the circumstances, and 1323, 4 and 5 was verified. 9 by one who without any fault was unaware that a penalty was attached to the law or precept. 10 by one who acted
So
without
this is this particular... Well, okay, continue.
without full imputability, provided there was grave imputability.
Mm.
A judge can act in the same manner if any other circumstance exists which would lessen the seriousness of the offense. An accused is not bound by an automatic penalty in the presence of any of the circumstances enumerated in 1.
Yeah, anyways, you need to be quite a lawyer to understand all these things. However, the point is, who of you knew that there was an excommunication for abortion? Half. Okay. So, for the doctor who performs it like by hundreds and thousands, I would be very surprised if he would not know, because especially in this country, I think there would be some people who would take care to make him know what he's doing. But in like theoretical theoretical case, let us say that he did not know, I think it should apply the same rule as for a woman who would commit this without knowing.
Well, I mean, it says formal cooperation in an abortion constitutes a grave offense. The Church attaches the canonical penalty of excommunication to this crime, so that
Right.
would go to anybody involved in it.
Yeah, of
Well,
course.
the wording is a person who procures a successful abortion, and my understanding of that word is like you get it, you attain it, like you get it for yourself. And it doesn't, I thought maybe there'd be another one that says something about the abortionist or the person who performs the abortion. It doesn't specify that. But it could be also that I'm making an assumption of what it means by procures too. So. Thanks.
Yeah. So these are, I should acknowledge, but I'm not a canon law expert, so could not to give you the precise answer. But for sure, there are issues with that. It's serious, and that's why the Church says you're excommunicated if you do this. Now, this inalienable right to life of every innocent human individual is a constitutive element of civil society and its legislation. If this right is taken away from the most innocent and the most weak member of society, it is the beginning of crumbling down of all the society. That's for sure. We won't read, but it's quite a nice explanation. These smaller characters, but if you want, you can read it by yourself when you have time. Now, there's also a point about the treatment of embryo. And Church says it's okay as long as it respects the integrity. It's like really trying to help to heal the baby in the womb. Of course, it's okay. It has a right to it as any other person. But if it is in order to like make experimentations or like to get from the fetuses or from embryos like these stem cells for other, of course it's gravely it's comparable to organ trafficking, when people even kill other people in order to get their organs and to sell them. It's pretty much the same. Now there's this also very sensitive question of eugenics. Let's read 2275, the third paragraph, certain attempts.
Certain attempts to influence chromosomic or genetic inheritance are not therapeutic, but are aimed at producing human beings selected according to sex or other predetermined qualities. Such manipulations are contrary to the personal dignity of the human being and his integrity and identity, which are unique and unrepeatable.
Because it is like making of a human being a thing that you can order according to the options that you would select. When buying the car, you have your options like air conditioner or whatever you would choose. No, it's not the thing. It's the person. Now, euthanasia. That's also, just yesterday I've read about how these countries like Netherlands and Belgium, which adopted in 2002 these laws, and the first restrictions conditions were like only if the person is incurable and they think it's only 6 months left for him, if it is totally having his own mind and freely expresses his desire, etc., then the euthanasia could be procured. And now it comes that they would euthanize basically anybody, including children, and without any consent. Just the doctor decides that it is better. There was a story of a nun who refused to be euthanized, and doctor still euthanized her, and then he explained that it was for her good, because she was totally like negatively influenced by her obscurantist ideology. Basically, that's what he said, and he was just justified. See how when you open the doors to this absolute respect for the human life, it just goes. And why? It is just because economically more payable, because it's so expensive to keep these people alive. So it's encouraged even by government. So but it's and they said in this article that now seniors, they carrying on them a card, I do not want to be euthanized, because they are afraid. You never know, if you get to the hospital, it's no longer to help you to heal, they will help you to die.
Well, I think that you can kill your child up to age 12 if they were to come up with a disability to get injured or anything. You can use euthanasia now to 12 in the Netherlands.
It's crazy. So you see how our society becoming neo-pagan, post-Christian neo-pagan society, with no more respect of, think of these gladiators in Rome, or killing the babies because the father just does not like, or that's what we are coming up. So it is, of course, a murder to we can read 2277, just the first paragraph.
Whatever its motives and means, direct euthanasia consists in putting an end to the lives of handicapped, sick, or dying persons. It is morally unacceptable.
Maybe let's continue also with the second paragraph.
Thus, an act or omission which, of itself or by intention, causes death in order to eliminate suffering, constitutes a murder gravely contrary to the dignity of the human person and to the respect due to the living God, his creator. The error of judgment into which one can fall in good faith does not change the nature of the murderous act, which must always be forbidden and excluded.
So remember when we were talking in the beginning of the semester about these three elements of a moral act: the intention, the object, and the circumstances. The intentions might be the best in the world. The circumstances might be most terrifying and heartbreaking, but the object is always evil. It is a murder. And if you allow, with 100 of conditions, finally it will come to what is going on right now. See? Or another, again from this article, the example, there were two twins in their 40s, 46 actually, who were deaf born, and they were said that they probably will become blind, but they were not blind. It was just a probability, and they asked them both to be euthanized just because they were afraid to be blind, even without being. You see, it's crazy. You can just ask and you'll be killed. It's special. However, euthanasia, it is when I directly kill a person. But if, let's read 2278, it will be quicker than my explanations.
Discontinuing medical procedures that are burdensome, dangerous, extraordinary, or disproportionate to the expected outcome can be legitimate. It is the refusal of overzealous treatment. Here one does not will to cause death. One's inability to impede it is merely accepted. The decision should be made by the patient if he is competent and able, or if not, by those legally entitled to act for the patient, whose reasonable will and legitimate interests must always be respected.
You probably remember this case of this baby in the United Kingdom. Charlie, yeah. So it was not an euthanasia when they stopped this machine, because parents even acknowledged that they were no more hope to heal him. So it was not a euthanasia. It's perfectly the case of this article. However, what is clear that the state did not have the right to hinder the parents from trying when it was still some hope. This is gravely responsible for all these judges and the state organizations who refused, because the church is very clear. It is the parents who have the right to decide. Okay, so this is very important to see this difference between the euthanasia and when you legitimately can stop artificial maintaining in the life when you know that it will bring nothing. Suicide. Of course, suicide is a murder as well. Why? Let's read 22:80.
Everyone is responsible for his life before God who has given it to him. It is God who remains the sovereign master of life. We are obliged to accept life gratefully and preserve it for his honor and the salvation of our souls. We are stewards, not owners, of the life God has entrusted to us. It is not ours to dispose of.
Yeah, so as it works for the others, it works also for ourselves. So it's a murder. However, 22:82.
If suicide is committed with the intention of setting an example, especially to the young, it also takes on the gravity of scandal. Voluntary cooperation in suicide is contrary to the moral law.
So this is aggravating circumstances, and now?
Grave psychological disturbances, anguish, or grave fear of hardship, suffering, or torture can diminish the responsibility of the one committing suicide.
So this is also alleviating consequences. And I think of one story in the Soviet Union when this guy was caught and they told that he will be tortured tomorrow, next day, in order to renounce his faith, and he was praying the whole night, Lord, take away my life, and he died in the morning. That's a beautiful example how this can be a way to escape from both torture when you know that you're so weak that you might not resist, and at the same time not to commit this grave crime of murder of yourself.
So,
Go ahead.
well, I've heard that the church won't, I don't know if this is true or not, but the church won't have a mass for someone that has committed suicide.
It used to be in the times when the society was basically Christian and full of this eternal life's hope, and that would be really like a grave despair. But nowadays, in this post-Christian, neo-pagan society, it's no longer the case, and that's why. Let's read 22:83. It will explain why.
Okay. We should not despair of the eternal salvation of persons who have taken their own lives. By ways known to him alone, God can provide the opportunity for salutary repentance. The church prays for persons who have taken their own lives.
So see, now the church prays for them. And I think especially of this example of seeing John Mary Vianney, the Saint Cure of Ars, about this poor widow who was so desperate about her husband who jumped off the bridge, and he said to her, you should continue to trust and hope for him, because you do not know what happened between him and God, between bridge and the water. Yeah.
So like in the case of 9/11 terrorist attacks, like people are jumping from the building. I mean, they're gonna die anyway, but they're obviously that would have no effect. I mean, would that be considered suicide?
It's certainly with this alleviating condition, because what they wanted to escape the even worse.
The great fear of hardship and
Yeah,
suffering.
precisely.
Yeah, I would almost feel like jumping would be like trying to, a means of trying to survive, like even if it's that high up.
Yeah.
I always thought that they just wanted to escape this terrible pain of being burned alive. Because I mean, when you're on the 60th,
I didn't even think about it that way.
That
I
was-
just thought that was a way to get out.
yeah, no, I don't think
Escape.
so. I think it was to
Alleviate.
flee away. It's like you have the death before you, easier, like quicker, just to jump and die or stay and burn alive. So it's understandable. It's understandable that they did it. Probably I would have done it too, but it's still not moral. But it's clearly, like Catherine quoted, it alleviates enormously.
Wait, so it's not moral for them to have jumped?
Like, it would have been more moral for them to stay inside the building.
No, of course not.
Okay.
It is.
Like jumping off a building in any other scenario, like that'd be immoral. But like
When death is
If-
your only option.
if like a fire is
right,
approaching
right,
you,
right.
I don't know. Like my thought would be to jump, as in like maybe somehow I would survive, even though like my chances are zero. Like versus
You land on like a falling balloon.
yeah, you never know.
I think if it is your intention, then yes, of course, it's not a sin at all.
But Father, is what you're saying that it would be immoral to jump, but our culpability is diminished
Right,
significantly
exactly,
because it
exactly.
was out of grave fear or hardship or suffering.
Exactly. Because there are actions which objectively are immoral, but because of the situation can be diminished or even totally taken away. As we will see later on with the sixth command. And then we need to go if we want to look into it.
Sorry, me and the canon law, sorry.
Yeah. So when I say it is not moral, it's objective rule. But this objective rule, applied in a subjective way, it just changes totally the tone. But we still need to affirm that to commit a suicide, it's not good. Unless you really hope to escape.
All on the
And
balloon.
this changes
I don't know,
the
maybe
tone
you
totally.
grab a ledge.
Okay. Respect for the dignity of the person. So, very interesting point that the scandal can also cause death, a spiritual death in others. Let's read what the scandal is, 2284.
Scandal is an attitude or behavior which leads another to do evil. The person who gives scandal becomes his neighbor's tempter. He damages virtue and integrity. He may even draw his brother into spiritual death. Scandal is a grave offense if by deed or omission another is deliberately led into a grave offense.
And I think, for example, of this Playboy founder who died like a few months ago. It's a perfect example of scandal. Like spiritual murderer. It can come not only from the persons, it can come also from laws or institutions, 2286.
Scandal can be provoked by laws or institutions, by fashion or opinion. Therefore, they are guilty of scandal who establish laws or social structures leading to the decline of morals and the corruption of religious practice, or to social conditions that, intentionally or not, make Christian conduct and obedience to the commandments difficult and practically impossible. This is also true of business leaders who make rules encouraging fraud, teachers who provoke their children to anger, or manipulators of public opinion who turn it away from moral values.
See, good to know for the future Christian businessmen and businesswomen
And
Okay.
teachers.
and teachers and teachers.
Don't provoke your children to anger.
I know, that's probably easier to do than a business leader making rules encouraging fraud.
Yeah. Now, respect for health, it is also part of this fifth commandment. Let's read 22:89.
If morality requires respect for the life of the body, it does not make it an absolute value. It rejects a neo-pagan notion that tends to promote the cult of the body, to sacrifice everything for its sake, to idolize physical perfection and success at sports. By its selective preference of the strong over the weak, such a conception can lead to the perversion of human relationships.
Now, so this is one extreme. The other opposite extreme, 22:90.
The virtue of temperance disposes us to avoid every kind of excess, the abuse of food, alcohol, tobacco, or medicine. Those incur grave guilt who, by drunkenness or a love of speed, endanger their own and others' safety on the road, at sea, or in the air.
So you see, even an overeating, it belongs to the violation of the fifth commandment. See? You harm yourself. And in a special blame is on drugs, and that's the Article 2291, but we won't read it. It's just, I mentioned that it's drugs, use of drugs is especially grave. The scientific research, so basically the church says it's okay as long as there's some like conditions, it's not like overly dangerous. There's total knowledge and consent of the person who accepts this experimental treatment and stuff like that. But if you do without the knowing of the person, without their consent, it is of course immoral. It is contrary to the dignity of persons. Organ transplants are okay. It's even meritorious to be organ donors, but it is not good at all if it is done without your knowledge or forcing you, which can lead to your mutilation and even death. This is, of course, grave.
I've heard a lot of controversy over organ donating.
Mm-hmm.
Because, they always or at least what I've heard growing up is to not do it, or whatever, because of the risk of you have to be alive for certain organs to be donated. And so that is kind of a gray area, and it's dependent on the doctor or whoever, and so it could get abused, I guess, that privilege very easily. But
let's read what the church says in 2296 on this issue.
I think it's Catherine.
Organ transplants are not morally acceptable if the donor, or those who legitimately speak for him, have not given their informed consent. Organ transplants conform with the moral law and can be meritorious if the physical and psychological dangers and risks incurred by the donor are proportionate to the good sought for the recipient. It is morally inadmissible directly to bring about the disabling mutilation or death of a human being, even in order to delay the death of other persons.
So these are the conditions that the church gives. Now, if you're an organ donor and the organs can be used only when you're still alive, as far as I understand, it basically can happen if you're in a serious accident, and if you have there's a constat of the what it is called clinical death that's irreversible, then I can understand that they can take your organs out while you're still like vegetatively alive, even though you will not be alive anymore. But I hear what you say about the abuse.
Yeah.
And in our society, what we just gave as an example of these euthanasia abuse, I here understand the concern, and I think it would be very interesting to have a discussion more widely about it. Absolutely.
Just that now.
Mm.
We're running out of time.
So, respect for bodily integrity. So, kidnapping and hostage taking are also covered by this commandment, the fifth commandment, as well as terrorism, amputations, mutilations, forced sterilizations. These are, of course, immoral. I think, for example, how do they call it? The mutilation of female genitals. There's like this
Type of sterilization.
It's
genital mutilation.
yeah, it's not a sterilization, but really like mutilation. It's like a
They do it in
culture-
like third world countries.
it's a cultural point, but it's like a clear mutilation. There's nothing like with the circumcision, which has something like hygienic aspect. It's not at all. So this is clearly
make sure
immoral.
the females stay virgins.
Or that they would it's not virgins, but that they would be
experience pleasure.
yeah, they would not experience pleasure, and thus like would not commit adultery, stuff like that. But it's extremely painful. Some girls would not survive this operation. So it's clearly the mutilation. It's not at all. Whereas circumcision for a boy, it can be legit. And as far as you know, in this country, it basically very common thing to do. And respect for the dead also. The bodies of the dead must be treated with respect of charity, faith and hope of the resurrection, because our body is the temple of the Holy Spirit, and there is a hope of it being risen. However, we can look into autopsies and cremation 2301.
Autopsies can be morally permitted for legal inquests or scientific research. The free gift of organs after death is legitimate and can be meritorious. The Church permits cremation provided that it does not demonstrate a denial of faith in the resurrection of the body.
It's clear, I think. Now, the peace and war. Anger. I think it's interesting to see what exactly the Church means by anger as a sin. Let's read 23:02.
By recalling the commandment, "You shall not kill," our Lord asked for peace of heart and denounced murderous anger and hatred as immoral. Anger is a desire for revenge.
That's the point. Anger, which is sinful, is the desire for revenge. It's not just, the passion of anger. It must be, it must have this goal of revenge. That is the anger which is morally sinful. Mm-hmm.
To desire vengeance in order to do evil to someone who should be punished is illicit, but it is praiseworthy to impose restitution to correct vices and maintain justice. If anger reaches the point of a deliberate desire to kill or seriously wound a neighbor, it is gravely against charity. It is a mortal sin. The Lord says, "Everyone who is angry with his brother shall be liable to judgment."
So it's not, the anger is not like being of a bad mood and not like nice smiling and responding unkindly. It's not this, the anger. It is very clearly, very precisely desired revenge. Okay? Same thing with hatred. hatred is a very grave sin. Avoiding war. So about the war now, of course, it's also pretty important. Let's read 1:307.
The fifth commandment forbids the intentional destruction of human life. Because of the evils and injustices that accompany all war, the Church insistently urges everyone to prayer and to action so that the divine goodness may free us from the ancient bondage of war.
Mm-hmm. However, 2308. Mm-hmm.
All citizens and all governments are obliged to work for the avoidance of war. However, as long as the danger of war persists and there is no international authority with the necessary competence and power, governments cannot be denied the right of lawful self-defense once all peace efforts have failed.
That's to say, what works for a personal case, as we saw with the legitimate self-defense, it works also for the societies. However, there are strict conditions for legitimate defense by military force, which is in 2309. We can look real quick to these conditions.
The strict conditions for legitimate defense by military force require rigorous consideration. The gravity of such a decision makes it subject to rigorous conditions of moral legitimacy at once and the same time. The damage inflicted by the aggressor on the nation or community of nations must be lasting, grave, and certain. All other means of putting an end to it must have been shown to be impractical or ineffective. There must be serious prospects of success. The use of arms must not produce evils and disorders graver than the evil to be eliminated. The power of modern means of destruction weighs very heavily in evaluating this condition. These are the traditional elements enumerated in what is called the just war doctrine.
The
The
evolution.
evaluation of these conditions for moral legitimacy belongs to the prudential judgment of those who have responsibility for the common good.
Okay. The other point is the permanent validity of moral law during armed conflict, 2312.
The Church and human reason both assert the permanent validity of the moral law during armed conflict. The mere fact that war has regrettably broken out does not mean that everything becomes licit between the warring parties.
Yeah, so it's not because it's war that you can do whatever you want, and that's why there are these war crimes for which people are punished, because I mean we still are humans, even it happens this woe to be at war. Let's maybe look 2315.
The accumulation of arms strikes many as a paradoxically suitable way of deterring potential adversaries from war. They see it as the most effective means of ensuring peace among nations. This method of deterrence gives rise to strong moral reservations. The arms race does not ensure peace. Far from eliminating the causes of war, it risks aggravating them. Spending enormous sums to produce ever new types of weapons impedes efforts to aid needy populations. It thwarts the development of peoples. Over-armament multiplies reasons for conflict and increases the danger of escalation.
So just wanted to hear you guys to hear the position of the Church on this issue, because you of course have heard so many times saying that it's the best way to deter the aggressor, to have all the arms possible and the latest, most modern, whatever. But the Church says no. It just increases the risk, because the single slightest human error might provoke this nuclear catastrophe, or even now with these third generation arms, autonomous robots, which can decide whether they kill or not, like these drones, they can send like thousands of drones with a very precise command to find this particular person and kill it. And this drone would just search for you and you kill it, because so it's it's scary. It's really scary. It's like this technology in the latest iPhone, the scanning the face, and there's no way to it's more precise than a fingerprint. So there's no way to escape such a weapon, and it can be extremely precisely oriented towards very concrete persons. And it's coming. It's coming. So recently, like 300 companies producing these third generation arms requested the United Nations to make rules for their use before it's too late. Yeah, so the last thing, which is a very beautiful point, is 23:17. Especially I wanted... Well, let's read everything, but the small characters is the most interesting. Mm-hmm.
Injustice, excessive economic or social inequalities, envy, distrust, and pride raging among men and nations constantly threaten peace and cause wars. Everything done to overcome these disorders contributes to building up peace and avoiding war. Insofar as men are sinners, the threat of war hangs over them and will so continue until Christ comes again. But insofar as they can vanquish sin by coming together in charity, violence itself will be vanquished, and these words will be fulfilled. They shall beat their swords into plowshares and their spears into pruning hooks. Nation shall not lift up sword against nation, neither shall they learn war anymore.
Thank you. And 23:27.
Because of the evils and injustices that all war brings with it, we must do everything reasonably possible to avoid it. The Church prays, from famine, pestilence, and war, O Lord, deliver us.
Okay, so we just made the fifth commandment. And for the sixth, there's as much.
So next week is the sixth commandment?
The point is that next week there's no class because I will be in Princeville preaching this retreat. So we have just one class left.
To do 6, 7, 8, 9, and 10.
Which is impossible. So 9 and 10 are pretty short, and they're basically like an echo on what will be in the 7th commandment concerning the property, and the 6th commandment, which we had to look into today. But the 7th and 8th are still pretty extensive. So my question, do you guys want to look into the 6th commandment by yourself and we continue in 2 weeks with 7th and 8th? Or we just keep the 6th for next and last meeting on the semester, and saying that the last 4 commandments basically will be by your own learning? It's up to you, but to my mind the 6th commandment is as pivotal and important as the 5th, so probably it would be good to look into together.
Yeah, I went over with 6, but is it possible to work the other commandments into the next semester? Because there's not a lot of material in part 4 in comparison with
It
3.
looks like it's not, but it is extremely deep and interesting. It's the most spiritual part of the Catechism. I mean, the most beautiful, the most...
Which part?
The prayer.
Part
the prayer.
4.
The upcoming semester. But what we can try to do, yes, at least we can maybe try to have one commandment for each class, and then just do what we can with the prayer portion, So like the first 4 meetings on prayer would be like half with life in Christ and half with the prayer. If this is
Father,
okay.
I personally don't have a strong feeling one way or the other. So my suggestion would be for you to choose how it would be most clear in your mind to teach it. I mean, you could probably do it any of those ways, but unless someone else has a strong.
I would like to go over
Everything.
Well, yeah, but I mean, like next week.
This in 2
Yeah.
weeks. In 2 weeks.
Or yes.
Uh-huh.
And yeah, if we can finish up the commandments, I would like that. Are you going on our silent retreat by any chance?
I am not, because I'll be in Domhouse writing my thesis. Savannah.
Yeah, I'm fine either way. I'd like to do the 6th commandment next week.
Me too.
Okay, so in 2 weeks. In 2 weeks we'll do the 6th
We would all
commandment.
like to do it next week, though.
Oh, yeah.
And then I will see. I think we will try to do as much as possible. Like I said, I will try to integrate the last commandments in the first classes of the upcoming semester.
One really quick question.
Mhm.
So if you or were in a position where you could either save the life of one person or the life of 20 people, do you have an obligation to save more?
Certainly not an obligation. There's no such a thing as a lesser evil. The people usually use it, but I mean, what is a moral and mortal sin? It is a moral and mortal sin. So basically, in such situations, you have to find out according to your prudence, because one person might be much more important for the survival of the whole society, let us say, than like 20 other people.
So
It's
what
not
about-
qualitative.
What if it was like 20 random strangers and the one is your child or your spouse? Then don't you actually have an obligation to them?
In this sense, yes, because there's an order of charity. It's order of charity which makes that you should love most, whom you should love most after God, yourself, and a neighbor. And then first goes God, then yourself, it's not neighbor, and then only neighbor. Because you cannot love your neighbor as yourself if you don't love yourself first. So it's not even Virgin Mary after God, it's me. And then only theirs. And the others, there's like different stages of different orders of charity, and actually the relatives are the first, absolutely. So in this case, yes, your child will be more important than 20 strangers. It's normal, it's natural, it's according to a nature and according to the order of charity. And the other point, well, when you have 2 different groups of strangers, but again, it's so theoretical, these things. But there's like one who can, again, see how many people would perish to defend their king. Why? Because the king is this element of unity and cohesion of society, and the people would sacrifice their lives in order to protect their king, because the life of this one person, in this sense, is more important than a lot of others. Even though before God, of course, every life is sacred, and that's why, like I said, there's no such a thing as lesser evil. All evil is evil. But in these cases, we need to act according to the prudence to see what would be the less worst thing to do. It's crazy. We'd better not be in such situations ever.